from several locations to make it seem as if there was more than one gunman involved. He was finally taken out by a bomb loaded on a robot. Mayor Mike Rawlings.
He had a choice to come out and we would not harm him.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, check, check.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? You there? Are you there? Are you there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can, very well. Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. I could hear you before, and I can hear you now. I could hear you the entire time. You are heard.
Hello?
Hello? Check, check. Hello? Wait, 1 second. Check, check, check. Hold on.
There you go.
Oh, wait a minute. Check, check. Oh. Check, check. There, that's better. All good?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, I've got you routed, and setting up the mix minus on this mixer is always a bit of a task. I apologize. Hi. There we go. Good morning, everybody in the chat room. How you guys doing? Second. All right. There we go. Let me make sure that. All right. Now we're rolling. Good times. Hi, everybody. Been quite a week. We will certainly delve into it. Lizzie is doing well. As we move into the new home, she may get released into the wild. She is an alligator lizard indigenous to the California region. And as she gets longer and bigger, I think she's a survivor, and I think she deserves a chance to procreate. Perhaps she already had, but I don't know, because she's fairly small when I found her. I mean, compared to what she is now, every other alligator lizard is small.
30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
Live exclusively for WCPT AM and FM in Chicago and streaming worldwide at chicagosprogressivetalk.com. Standing up and speaking out, here's Hal Sparks.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
To do the vibes.
Well, it's been quite a week, everybody. The nationwide protests about the police shooting unarmed black men and the tide of it, which seemed to reverse for a time and then had two shocking examples of it this week, led to increasingly emotional protests, increasingly, while peaceable protests, loud and direct protests, and in my opinion, rightly so. And in many ways, it is unfortunate that the culmination of those protests, the exclamation point put on it, was the shooting of killing of 5 police officers and shooting of 11 total in Dallas, and one civilian by a man who stated to the police that he wanted to kill white officers and white people. And the unfortunate aspect of that being the end point of the week's protest, it gives the illusion that this is what it led up to. The unfortunate part of when human beings look at a series of events is that in our own storytelling history, we tend to tie examples together in groups of 3, and the third one is the one that clinches it. In this particular case, the shooting of the 2 black men is punctuated by the reaction of this man, Mika Johnson, a veteran of Afghanistan, an American war vet, moving around from different positions and shooting as a sniper at police officers and killing 5 of them, and critically wounding others and putting everyone at that protest in grave danger. And we need to, I think, primarily recognize that we should focus on the numbers in certain circumstances like this. One man did this, much like one man did the Orlando shooting. But the vast majority of people involved in those circumstances were either there as patrons or protesters, or came to support or peaceably demonstrate against, disagree, but nonviolently. As loud as many of the protests have gotten and as emotional as they get, the reality is that this is a necessary and protected part of our democracy. It is essential, especially when circumstances exacerbate over time and build a narrative that needs to be undone, both by recognition that not every police officer a black person sees is against them. That needs to be a reassurance that's more than verbal, and that it's experiential. And that every time a police officer pulls someone over, that person is not an enemy combatant. You know, we have dealt with a lot of issues in our country that are tangential in some ways to how this went down, and how our relationship with guns and guns as a solution have gotten more egregious. And one of the main elements that I personally think is directly related to how the African American community and the police have looked at each other over the years is related in many ways to our increasing focus on guns and guns as a solution, and the issues that we've had around guns themselves aren't just one-sided. They're not just there are elements of the public who are aligned with the NRA who want every gun they could possibly have to fight off tyranny sometime in the future. The Ben Shapiro line, the idea that I don't have guns for self-defense against a burglar, really. I have it in case I have to take over my country again, which is in the Constitution, which is absurd on its face as a concept that you're ever going to be able to do that. That you're ever going to that Ruby Ridge is really the indicator of what it's like when an individual decides to not use all the tools available to them in the legal realm to work out their grievance with the government and just decides to open fire. And that can't be our gold standard for how we deal with tyrannical government. Wait till it gets too bad and then open fire. The responsibility of the citizenry is to make sure, especially because we're in a democracy, it doesn't get that far. That we take great care. That we understand that there is value in our continual focus on the freedom to express oneself, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to go unobstructed to places regardless of your skin color, and not have to worry that if you're pulled over by the police, you'll have an experience that is substantially different than anybody else simply because of how you look. That's an important aspect of American life. And due to a series of ratcheting factors that are kind of, on the one hand, fascinating in their dichotomy, because over time in the United States, violent crime has actually declined quite a bit since the 80s. And it continues to go down. But our focus on when it does happen makes it, I think, all the more shocking, all the more... each of these moments brings us to a point where, because of social media, because of the availability of news, because of 24-hour news cycles, that people are victimized and re-victimized and re-victimized again and again in their minds as a community, especially because they see, something like the shooting in Baton Rouge, and it becomes all too clear that could be you. That could be you walking down the street at the wrong time, encountering the wrong police officers. And that's a terrible space to live in. That's, one of the interesting things about the conversation that's going on in this country as far as the experience of when it comes to Black Lives Matter, or when it comes to women's issues or LGBT issues, is the desire for equal rights and the conversation around equal rights, which is really cribbed from the past. The languaging of saying we want equal rights came from a time when, on paper, people didn't. They did not have equal rights. And in many fronts, women... increasingly, the LGBT community, African Americans, and other minorities do have those rights. They absolutely, on paper, have those rights. And so when the language of we want rights, we want our rights, we're fighting for our rights is used, the other right, the right in quotes, says, well, you have all the rights. So what are you whinging about? You have every right. You know, women technically have every right. Minorities have every right. The problem is those rights are not equally applied. That we have moved from the point of attaching, and this is, I will say, separate from the LGBT community, in that there are not equal rights in the LGBT community, and until, you know, your right to not get fired because of who you are, is codified, you know, across the board. Those people live on it's a slippery slope at some point. You step in the wrong spot, you're gone. That's a scary place to live. And I think in many ways, the way a lot of LGBT people have expressed their frustration about lack of protection in the workplace is akin and aligned with the way black people feel every time they're pulled over by the police, no matter how they're dressed, no matter what they look like, no matter what their car is like. That's not a way to live. That is an emotional amount of a type of emotional baggage that, when carried around repeatedly, interferes with your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. And to me, that's crucial. We're going to talk about more of that when we come back. I'm going to stay away from the details of the shooting and this show and kind of talk about how we heal about this stuff and where I think we can go as far as community outreach, local policing. Chicago always obviously has its own major issues to deal with, and we'll take your calls about that as well. 773-763-9278. This is the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. We're on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and you can follow me on Twitter. Use the hashtag HSRPM if you want to tweet. We'll be back right after this.
Hal, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is rough. And I'm under stress a lot every day when I'm away from home, away from my boys.
Oh, I can't.
And I worry. I pray every time I leave out the house, every time they leave out the house.
You know, I work with one of the kids on Lab Rats, TJ Williams.
Right.
He's the sweetest kid you will ever meet in your life. I've known him now since he was 14 years old. And it scares me to death. It scares me to death that I would have to worry about him. Because he would leap to anyone's distress. He's a sensitive and caring human being, period. He's just a sweetheart. And yet there are parts of this country where if he asked a second question to a police officer, he would be in danger of dying. That scares me. And it shouldn't. And again, it's really about that living every day that way. That people go, why are they so angry? Like, okay, wait a second.
Yes.
And then the other thing is police officers, I have family who are in the military. It's extraordinary that, I have heard from my family in the military and in law enforcement that in some ways their buddies, their people that they work with on the force all the time, say that one of the hardest things they have to do is to not be racist, is to fight this urge to just start profiling because of their experience is so repetitive.
I don't think it's the police officer's fault. It's the way of training.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
that's the militarization of it. You can't think of them as an adversary, and that's what I'm going to talk about when we get back.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's been
10 seconds.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Like it's just heartbreaking.
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
Welcome back, everybody. I get a bit choked up talking about some of this stuff. The reality is, I worry about my black friends. I worry about some of my black coworkers. And it is not completely, and I also, by the way, worry about my family members that are law enforcement. Let's talk about these things in stages. There's a lot of elements to this. We need to continually talk about the stress, shock, and psychological damage that is done to that is ongoing when black people, when parents of black children have to worry about their kids simply getting pulled over at a traffic stop. That the normalcy of life could endanger their child. That teenage interactions with adults could ratchet up statistically at a far higher rate if your kid is black or Hispanic in certain parts of the country. That again, we will continue the march towards equal rights for everyone where they do not exist. But as they increasingly exist, it is about the equal application of those rights that becomes important. And what I want to talk about today is the damage done to both the African American community, quite frankly, the low-income white families in this country as well, and to the police, to the families of police officers and the police themselves, by the continued militarization of police. On the one hand, there started a trend by the spike in the drug war in the late 80s, early 90s, where police were encountering increasingly higher elements of, weaponry on the streets. And so police departments started acquiring military-style weaponry in their SWAT departments. And those SWAT departments went from simply guys with more ammo and more training to borderline military tactical troops. They were trained to deal with high impact situations, multiple shooters. The kind of stuff that you'd see in the movie Heat, bank robberies where people have automatic weapons, bulletproof vests, circumstances that are ferociously uncommon. But in a country with as many guns and with as much of a fascination around guns that we have, increased with regularity. So the militarization of the police in many ways began, obviously it was a trickle, but there was a big spike of it around the drug war in South Central Los Angeles and in other parts of the country. It was actually a secondary spike to how the police used to handle the Italian booze running in upstate New York and areas like that. I mean, straight up machine guns. We brought that back down, and then it came back up. But here's the issue: in this country, it is unconstitutional for the military to police or patrol the citizenry. We have very specific laws about that. We have the Army is not to operate inside the borders of the United States except in a capacity in an emergency to deal with getting people out of, if a tornado's happened and you've got a stage nearby. But ultimately, that is the rule of the National Guard and the FBI. The FBI serves as the internal version. The CIA would be the external, and you're dealing with national and international threats. Post 9/11, the idea is that they weren't talking to each other, and as terrorism became a concern in terms of how porous the country could be in certain areas, they had to learn to work together. Over time, the ratcheting up of this idea that, well, the military itself is not allowed to operate, but we're dealing with military-level threats. So therefore, the police, effectively in a circumvention of that particular rule, became a version of the military. That in how threats were handled, and believe me, if you have police in your family at all, the interesting thing is that the family of police officers and the family of most black people in this country share the same fear. This could be the day they step outside and I never see them again. The amazing part of this is that there is so much overlap in these two communities, and it's a genuine fear on both sides. It is a valid fear. So a police officer's family says goodbye to him as he goes, leaves to go on to work. They could die that day. Unfortunately, black parents say goodbye to their kid as he goes to school that day, or she goes to school that day, or one of the family members goes to school that day. That could be the last time they see them. So there's actually a lot of, on an emotional level, on a personal level, there are a lot of bonds to be had in these two communities. Unfortunately, they've been put in an adversarial circumstance because they view each other as the source of this worry. And I think the militarization of our police to deal with, our post 9/11 feverish response, we have had to some level on a police and first responder level, we have had a response that's equivalent to our Iraq War response. We are striking out in the wrong. We are responding to a genuine, shocking threat with the wrong tactics. And as we ratchet up the militarization of the police, what comes with that is increasingly high firepower held by regular community-level cops, not SWAT, but available and constant body armor, all the stuff that's necessary to the job. But the training of police to keep themselves alive has reached a military level. You've got police in anytime they're entering they're holding their gun in the Sewell position, pointing it straight down so they don't shoot the officer in front of them. This is a military, tactical, physical position that says anywhere around you there could be a threat. And in certain circumstances, that is true. Most of the circumstances, it is not. Unfortunately, dealing with that every day, going, any car I pull over could be the last car I pull over because some drug runner, some sovereign citizen can decide my day is up. And they have access to any gun they want. So, I am now in a position where I might as well be in Beirut. I've gone from in the car with my partner or alone in my police cruiser or alone on the beat or with a partner on another motorcycle, pulling over people, dealing with traffic stuff, trying to interact with the public in as peaceable a way possible to, wait, something's wrong here with this car. Is it me? Am I profiling, or is this really dangerous? Those judgments, police have seen those judgments go right and wrong so many times that now they don't take there is no room for judgment anymore. To save themselves and to protect themselves, the police unions and police departments across the country have, because of the circumstance that they're in, have trained themselves and have received training that is more militaristic. When you are pulled over by the police, it is now standard form that one of the police officers stands in your blind spot off to your right, as the other police officer is not right next to your window, but a couple inches towards the door frame itself, because it's harder to shoot across towards your own shoulder instead of just out the window. And the other police officer is there with their hand on their sidearm just in case you twitch, no matter who it is. They do this with everyone. The difference is the frequency with which they react or overreact or are afraid or deal with this. We need to take a break. When we come back, this has been a ratcheting up over time because of the illusion of violence as well as the actuality of violence. We need to deal with the actual violence that's there, but there will always be a certain amount. But the one thing we can do is on a cultural level, deal with the illusion of violence. The idea that the world is full of any second now. Because I don't know if you looked at the population statistics, there are 9 billion people in the world by 2017. Life is kicking death's ass right now. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Mm-hmm. I'm just reading your chat, guys, and catching up. The Gretchen Carlson story, we'll deal with that in an hour two, I think is valuable as a conversation. Yeah. Because there was some cringeworthy stuff that happened on Fox and Friends all the time. Like, because Steve Ducey is a doof. I don't doubt that he has a dark side. We all do, but he seems more, quite frankly, stupid. Whereas Brian Kilmeade is uninformed and mean-spirited. And so it gets written off just as stupidity sometimes, but there's something more grotesque there, in my opinion.
I don't know if you want to take calls, but we got 6 callers.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, I guess they want to talk about the shooting, except for one, the last one. He wants to talk about Trump and accusations of rape.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That stuff is gnarly. I stopped voting 100 years ago. Yeah, well, Rich, start voting again, man. There's no excuse. You do realize that, okay, I don't want to have to go on the voting rant every single time, but if you go, we got a two-party system and everybody's crap. Okay, if you go in and look at judgeships every single time, there's usually 6 of them. Some of them are independent. Some of them are Green Party. You don't have to vote for president. If you think it's rigged and there's a two-party system, so what?
30 seconds.
Thanks. Go in, vote for one thing, and leave. I vote for the bills that are coming up. Have a say. Even if it's just to say, no, I don't like the way they're governing in general. Do it. Yeah, I got...
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
A lot of times in politics and in political discourse, when we're dealing with left versus right, and I enjoy the back and forth about that as much as anybody, the political game, and I love debate and argument for a couple reasons. One, it helps you sharpen your argument. It also helps you stay clear about your principles and what you want to accomplish. If you hear a new idea, you can incorporate it into your stuff. Read Bernie and Hillary. However, it gets to the point where people are getting entrenched for emotional reasons, and you can't see the bridges that are there. And like I said, the African-American community and police both have the same fear when they leave the house a lot of times. And that could be a bridge point. Now, again, the legal rights, the right to peaceably assemble, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to, not be stopped for no reason, and go about your business, to not, have to submit to a search without a probable cause, all that kind of stuff. Everybody in this country has that right. But right now, it is not equally applied. And that's a cultural thing. That doesn't change because of action of government. It can't. Because you can make rules against quote-unquote profiling, but then that takes judgment out of the police officer's hands. And that it also presumes all police officers are white, and that a black officer or a Hispanic officer or an Asian officer cannot respond to, I think that guy's holding. My experience as a police officer says that to me, looking beyond the fact that he might be with 4 other black guys, but he's the one I'm worried about. That has to be part of their job. That's part of what they've got to do. That becomes where it's cultural. How do we deal with these people? Okay, as you militarize the police and you increase their firepower and you increase their tactical response, it gets so egregious that they killed this guy, this shooter, with a bomb strapped to a remote unit. They basically strapped a bomb to a remote control car, effectively, rolled it around close to him and blew it up. That's a scary precedent on all fronts. Because think what you will, that's a drone strike. It's an extrajudicial drone strike on an American citizen. That's technically what that is. But on the other hand, none of those cops want to wait till that guy is out of ammunition when they have no idea how much he is. He's screaming at them that he's going to continue to kill police officers. And he's continuing to fire. They had a continuing exchange of fire. What are you going to do? That guy, you're in an adversarial war-like situation with this guy. So in that circumstance, you've got a SWAT response. You've got a guy acting as a sniper. He's incredibly dangerous. So the response to it is a military one. And we'll talk about the extrajudicial nature of drone strikes and all that kind of. We could do a whole show on that, because unfortunately it is not as cut and dried as either side likes to look at it. It's a lot more complicated, and it's just as complicated in this circumstance. The problem for these police officers these days is that in their training, how they're in the circumstance that they're in, they are basically trained that every car they encounter, every person that they frisk, and by the way, on a statistical level, this isn't true, but on a personal level, it is, could be just as dangerous to them as this guy. Think of the guy who was on his way to, shoot up, any number of things. The same day, an Asian man, so it can hardly be said to be related to, the shooting of called 911 to his own home and ambushed the police officers. Killed 2 of them, I think, the same day. These police that were going to that house were just responding to a 911 call. How does that ripple through the entire police force now? How does that affect that entire neighborhood? How do they now respond to 911 calls? In that, okay, if they want to go home, they start acting like they're in Beirut. If they start acting like they're in Beirut, they start interacting with the community in a way that is impersonal and doesn't take into the fact that while one guy would do something like this, the rest of the neighborhood just needs help. And then you get in situations where police are put in situations where they are literally doing the job of mental health officials. They're, when you had a crazy person, the joke in this country used to be the guys in the white van would show up with 2 big nets. And, like we view animal control now. They would take you to Bellevue. They would take you to a mental hospital. Now, the police show up and are responsible for dealing with the mentally ill. Most times, if they're on the lighter side of it, if they're just having a mild episode, they can arrest them, and there's some level of cognition in that person where they can actually respond. A lot of times, this is where we hear the stories of police shooting a naked man who's holding a knife because he moved towards them. Now, back up again to 1990, where this ratchet up of there's more guns on the street, crack is an epidemic. This is the storyline. Cops are being fed. One cop gets killed this way. It ripples through the whole department. Nobody wants to go home dead, so they start reacting this way. On the other side, because of this stuff that's happening in their neighborhood, every black person in the country goes, these cops are out to kill me because they think I'm part of this group, and all I need to do is get dragged from my car, and I'm dead. So if I see a cop, I better run. Freddie Gray. That's what that leads to. Why are they running? If you're not guilty, why are you running? Because I don't have to be guilty to die. And each side constantly ratcheting up the experience that they're having because of real fears. And the actors on the outside, the people who are voicing concern about these circumstances to each community or to the community across, are dealing with the emotional impact of something so egregious. Dead cops being ambushed by sovereign citizens at a car, when they pull over a car, or a 911 call to a house. You go there because you think you're there to help somebody, and the guy inside opens fire on you and your partner. Or you, in the case of last week, a 16-year-old kid called the police, gave a description of himself robbing the place, had an airsoft gun, and basically used the cops to commit suicide. So in that same moment, those police officers had 2 threats they experienced. One, here's a 16-year-old with a gun that turns out to be an airsoft gun later. But as far as you know, at that moment, he fits the description. He's there at the scene. He's armed. He points the gun at us, and they shot him. Then you find out, as a police officer, you're like, okay, this is a horrible situation, but there was an intruder. He had a gun. He pointed at us. This is terrible, but to protect ourselves, we had to do this. And then you go over to his body, and there's a dead 16-year-old with an airsoft gun, and he made the phone call himself because he was using you to commit suicide. That's then you go home with that. And your whole department goes home with that. Call after call after call after call. This is, even on a personal experiential level, if this is not the day-to-day experience of most police officers, this is the legends that constantly work their way through the department. The rise in taser-related deaths and the overuse of tasers by police departments is directly related to the AIDS crisis. Police officers hearing stories of needles in pockets or blood from a suspect that had HIV causing infection in a police officer. Only took 5 or 6 cases like that to change the entire way police deal with suspects. Blue gloves and tasers. Suddenly, you're 2 feet away from the community. You're not even... And when you do touch somebody, if they move at all, your life is in danger. If they spit in your eye, they bleed on you. This is what cops carry with them. Cut to a 16-year-old A student is driving home and is a new driver. He's not great yet at driving a car. He rolls a stop sign because he didn't fully stop, or he stagger stops, catches the eye of a police officer. That police officer pulls him over. That police officer has just heard the story of a guy getting shot 6 blocks away at a stop. Pow. Cop freaks out. Kid reacts, twitches because he moves fast to dodge something. Or the police is physically overreacting to try to hold him down. Don't move, but the kid's being choked, or you're kneeling on his windpipe, or you've broken a rib because you slammed it down and the rib is poking into his lung. And so he's trying to turn just so he can breathe. And that's resisting arrest. And as he moves, you get more nervous. And as you move, he's in more pain and can't breathe. And then he's dead. And then that story carries through. These two communities have exactly the same concerns and deserve, A, to be heard and respected for the circumstance that they find themselves in. Because just like there are bad cops who can't wait to get their trigger off, taking somebody down, there are members of the African American community who can't wait to kill somebody, either black or white. There are cops and people in the African American community on the south side of Chicago, who take pride in who they've shot. And the vast majority of those communities hate those people. They endanger the lives of everybody else in that community. It's the same concerns. Black lives and blue lives have exactly the same concern. An incredible bridge could be built. We're going to take your calls right after this break. I went way over. I just had to get this said. Appreciate the callers for hanging in there. We'll start getting you guys right after this break. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. And going back to what's in the chat, Amos, deadly force should be the last resort, no excuses. I agree. The problem is, and this is the circumstance that a lot of cops find themselves in, is that it is the last resort. They think this is it. The only time that it's obviously not the last resort is when the person is running away. Because there are so many ways to catch somebody now. there, there's an element where, depending on what you stop them for, if there's a warrant for another car issue, or there's a warrant for child support, or there's a warrant for whatever, the idea that warrant just means is the responsibility of the internal culture of the police department. I remember, when I was in high school, the Northbrook cops had a reputation that, and by the way, Amos, I'm talking about perception, not reality. Because that's the problem with last resort, is that most of the time, unless you're talking about a straight-up racist cop who just can't wait to do something like this, it has kind of a
30 seconds
George Zimmerman attitude towards life, that it is their last resort. That's what I mean, just to clarify. Yeah, if it's a homicide warrant or kidnapping or whatever, chase that guy down. The other guy has an address.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
I know I filibustered the top of the show because there's obviously a lot of factors here, and I appreciate our callers. Obviously, we're going to take a few of you right now, and some of you will have to wait till after the top of the hour break, so I appreciate you guys for hanging in there. Who do we have, Lady B? Let's start right in.
We have Steve from the Gold Coast.
Cool. Hey, Steve.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. And 2 points. One, I think you're absolutely right with regard to, the militarization of our police. This comes out of a rationale of the shall we say, instability, the violence of the late 1960s, the riots and so forth, and the war on drugs. Created this confluence in which, we said, well, you know what, the local police are the first line of defense, so, we really do need to ratchet up their capacity to respond to these acute threats. Then fast forward to the 1980s, well, you know what, local police could really use, given our war on drugs, this is the sort of war on drugs point two under Ronald Reagan. The local police could use some help. Why don't we give them surplus military equipment? Because, God knows, we have enough of it. It's also a way for the military-industrial complex to rationalize producing more because we can't give enough to our military. They've got enough. So where else can we dump it? Well,
right.
Local police, give it to them. And it's free by and large. Then move forward to post 9/11. Well, you know what? The threat can go on anywhere. So, Peoria, Illinois has to have a SWAT team. Everyone has to have a SWAT team because, if terrorists were to attack us there, the federal troops and forces can't be there in time. Peoria needs to have its own. And in all likelihood, they had one beforehand, but we had to ratchet it up. So now they need an armored personnel carrier and so forth. Mm-hmm. And there's a great piece, I believe it's Frontline that did it. There's a retired police officer who actually is a center point of this whole thing where, he talks about the militarization of our police and how SWAT teams, in the 1970s were used, as you point out, to respond to these large-scale threats, people barricaded, revolutionary forces, in some building, and that's what SWAT was designed to address. We moved from that to they're serving warrants on people who are growing marijuana in their basement. No history of violence or anything,
right.
But that's what we're doing with our SWAT teams, to give them something to do because
because they're unnecessary. Because
right,
as
exactly.
violent crime, and again, the violent crime statistics in this country have gone down. A lot of this change happened at the spike of it, at the top arc of it.
Absolutely.
And there's
the other point is, that and again, sort of this out of well-intentioned thinking comes sometimes sort of a bad outcome. We have said that our forces that have been serving abroad during these conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth. That's policy that extends before that, but it certainly was ratcheted up. When spots become available in police departments, we're going to give some preference to people who've had military service. Well, the guys who served as scouts, snipers, and in the Marines, Army Rangers, SEALs, Green Berets, all these sorts of people. These are individuals who have a lot of military training. They are not the average guy who served. They were there on the front line. This is their skill set. And so we matriculate those people into our police forces, and that's who it makes up your SWAT teams. You go to a SWAT team in any major city in this country. You ask those guys what their background is. It's not the Boy Scouts. These guys, most of their adult military life, so we say job training, is in the military, fighting the worst of the worst.
Well, in adversarials, there is no good person in a war zone. There, I mean, as much as they might try to go, okay, these are civilians, these are the enemy combatants. Increasingly, since Vietnam, certainly, but especially in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these places, the chances of somebody who looks completely harmless killing you was very high. At least, again, whether it's a real circumstance or just the legend that trickles down that keeps you on your toes, which might be the difference between you going home alive. So it's better for you to hear the worst possible circumstance. It's, the example is, at the end of Rambo, the shoebox story. At the end of the First Blood movie, he talks about it, that was in the monologue in the book that this Vietnam vet that the character is based on. Kid comes up, asks him if he wants a shoe shine. He says no, but his buddy says yes. The box is wired and it blows his friend up. That's you can't take that kind of training and concept about who you're going to encounter into a city where you're actually not there as an adversarial military act. You are there to facilitate the rights and safety of everyone there. It's a different methodology. And both have value in the right circumstance, but they don't overlap very well, and that's what we're finding out increasingly. I appreciate the call, Steve. Let me grab one more before we get to the end of the hour, at least. Who do we got, Lady B?
We have Dave from Sacramento.
Cool. Hey, Dave. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
How you doing, Hal? Hey, I thought I was going to be on the happy hour last time, but it's okay. I got in early.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, here's the thing. I have a problem when people always say about this whole incident regard. By the way, 31% of Black Americans are most likely 3 times as much to be stopped on pulled over by a police officer. We already know that. Another thing also, it's funny how people say that when people say that, that we have it's a training problem. Well, let me enlighten you. No, that's not a training problem, because it seems like if it was a training problem, it seems like, how come Caucasians don't have an issue when it comes to having a training problem? Then they never get stopped. They never get pulled. They never get pulled over. It's it seems like, for example, that so it's not a training problem. The problem is that a lot of these people that are Black, that they get slapped in the wrist, and they know where it's going to go. They know it's the judicial system. Basically, it's a jury problem. That that they go in there and get slapped on the wrist. When they get out, everything is all in their favor. And I don't think why these people have lawyers for it, because they're going to get slapped on the wrist. So the problem when I have a problem is that this stuff is going to keep on going on until African Americans get justice and see cops go to jail.
Increasingly, Dave, they are. Increasingly, police are facing charges, and you can go district to district to see the difference between responsive districts. The Dallas police chief was known as a reformer. He's an African American himself. He's a very smart, highly qualified human being. This just happened in his area, but he's actually one of the people who've been trying to do better about this. We'll take more calls when we come back. We're running out of time. I appreciate the call. I do think it's a training issue, but it's also a cultural issue on both sides. And it's a cultural issue that America has. We'll be back. Yeah, it's a very old culture, Jerry. There's a couple of aspects of the statistic that Dave was talking about 33% of African Americans being pulled over versus whites, for example. By volume, obviously whites are pulled over and arrested and, shot by cops. I think they did a list of 500 and some odd people that were killed. The Guardian just did this. It's up on their website. 500 some odd people who were shot and killed by the police. 136 of them were black. 200 and some odd of them were white. Included in these, I think they separated by people of color because they included Omar Mateen because he was shot by the police officers and killed that way. And as you go through it, you start boiling down to in the case of on both black, white, Asian, any group, the real consistent part is if they're upper middle class or middle class, it's a lot of suicide by cop or domestic violence related stuff. As you move your way down the economic scale, the lower you get as far as how it's almost as if we should put what people make per year next to like if they're shot by the police, you should see what their salary was. Yeah, black people are 13% of the population approximately. And 30% of them, because of higher poverty rates and the areas, the impoverished areas, which is why, Clinton's concept of enterprise zones was actually very helpful over time, needs to be, I think, ballooned would be helpful. I think we need a Marshall Plan for the entire United States, money better spent than Iraq and Afghanistan. The problem is the inherent racism of some of the people that are still in Congress that have been in there since the 60s. They're the ones who tap the brakes on that. That's a whole other conversation. But, all the people on the right who complain about welfare as, it's supposed to be temporary and also fight every circumstance where you try to add some equanimity and some balance to being able to start a business, be able to get a loan, be able to get an education. One of the big ones, don't make school funds attached to local property values. Like that in and of itself, you'd see a 20% rise. Let's see, what was it? They face charges and are never found guilty. I assume, John, you're talking about police officers when you say they face charges and never found guilty. That's not true. Sometimes they are found guilty. A lot of times they aren't. But there are cops, especially in the last year, that have been increasingly going to jail for this kind of stuff, and rightly so. That's changing, and it should continue to change. And so, by the way, saying not enough of them are going to jail for these kind of things is a totally valid statement. Saying none of them ever go to jail isn't factually correct, and it plays into the narrative that somehow it's us against them and there's this total bifurcation. There isn't. There's movement happening here. It's important. Anytime, very rarely is fine, Robert, but it's increasingly less rare. It was almost invisible. I mean, we can't look at it the same way we look at the Rodney King beating. That was, an absurd miscarriage of justice in Simi Valley. It was just, it was insane. It is changing, and it's got to keep changing. Once you start having wins, you got to start recognizing those wins and dealing with them and going, this is, and so, by the way, that stands as a warning to cops who would act outside that, would go, that guy went to jail. You got to remind them. If you say nobody ever goes to jail, that's the constant storyline. That's how people think. That's how people, they don't deal with the reality a lot of times. They deal with whatever their personal legends are. They deal with the story they hear most often. And cable news is in the business of making sure that the story you hear most often is the worst possible thing. Yeah, Amos, I think there is something to that, that the kid, it may have been because the kid was white. I think it also might have been that, A, it was a kid and he kept tasing a child. Yeah.
30 seconds, and you have about 9 callers.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, we will peel through calls on this next one, yeah.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn pus-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
We have a lot of callers on the line and a great conversation happening on our YouTube chat. If you want to join in there, I'm going to tweet the link right now on my Twitter feed. And always, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the guys who are in the, everybody in the chat room. You guys are awesome. Anyways, let's take our callers though. We do have quite a few, so I want to make sure everybody gets in. So keep your idea tight as you can, and I'm open to full discussions. There we go. So
We have Tony.
Excellent. Hey Tony, welcome.
Hey Hal, what's going on, guy?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I just want to let you know that hey, you're one of my favorite polymaths on the planet. But this is the deal.
Yeah.
You hit a lot of nails on the head. The policeman and prison reform has got to take place in American society today. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we are quickly moving to is the militarization of our police force, and you absolutely said it correctly. This we're going to have to do one or two things. We're going to have to make a decision in America what we want to do on this a very significant issue. I know you haven't touched upon it. You probably want to bring it to our next show, but gun control, you need to throw that out there again.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this semi-automatic weaponry, again, this a specific group.
Did we lose him? Are we all right? Lady B, did we lose him? No, there he is. Okay. Sorry, we lost you there for a second. So we lost a little bit of your conversation. So go ahead, start again if you could. About
okay, yeah. I was saying that the militarization of is correct. What you were saying regarding the police strategies. What we have to do is this, because semi-automatic weaponry is taken over in American society. In my opinion, the Second Amendment has got to be reformed in the next 5 to 6 years. Mm-hmm. If not, we're going to have killing fields in America. That's just the way it is. There's always going to be pockets of crazy people and people who are just disingenuous to the government.
Right.
But putting that mixed in with semi-automatic weaponry is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. We're going to have to now. Also, we also need to look at not only policing reform, but as progressives, really need to take a look at prison reform. If we ever get some of these images that are coming out of our prisons on the internet, like that we're doing, like that what is happening now, people would be thoroughly shocked. Their heads would explode. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally. One of the things that we're going to have to do is that will impact our policing strategies. Number one, the legalization of drugs, and number two, the legalization of some of these vices. Because if you look at how that infiltrates and floats down, it really, really impacts our policing policies. But we have to bring this conversation back to gun control. That's the underlying issue.
I think I agree with you. It's interesting to me because what they talk about all the time is, the fallback is, well, if you take away the gun, if you criminalize guns, only criminals will have guns, and that law abiding citizens should have the right to buy any gun that they want at any time because they're law-abiding citizens. Well, guess what? Everybody's a law-abiding citizen until they commit a crime. It just and there's There have been serial killers in this country. BTK, who was, until he was actually recognized as BTK killer, viewed by the government and every other facility as a law-abiding citizen. So this idea that somehow you should just, if you're a law-abiding citizen or you're known as a law-abiding citizen, you should have access to military-grade weapons is an absurdity. It is not what you need for self-defense. It is, and if any circumstance where you need more than 30 shots to defend yourself, that means you're shooting cops or military personnel, and you have bigger fish to fry. You're not going to be able to handle your grievance through guns. It's too big for that. So what you're really talking about is this is just turf war. You're just having a turf war. But you're absolutely right. Here's this guy who was an Afghan vet, as far as everybody was concerned, a law-abiding citizen, and wasn't even particularly political. But there, on face, because he was a military veteran, why wouldn't you trust him to be able to own a gun like that? Well, because civilians don't need those kind of guns. Here's the other thing. This brings the lie to this whole conversation about guns anyways. Is this good guy with a gun nonsense obviously fell apart because Dallas is totally open carry. There was a guy at the rally that had a gun strapped to his back that they put a picture of him thinking he was a person of interest at this thing. Was walking around with a military-grade rifle. Who ultimately handled this person? Who ultimately dealt with them? The police. A citizen shooting back never occurred. There were plenty of armed citizens around. What did they do? They ran for cover and let the professionals handle it, because that's what you do in a civilized society. And that's why you have respect for police officers. If you live in the sticks, I understand wanting to have a shotgun and a long rifle to protect yourself and a handgun in your weird little neighborhood. But if you're living in a big city, that we have police and fire and EMTs to handle emergencies. They are dedicated human beings this is the purpose of their life. Let them have it and give them the honor due. And don't have them have to worry about, some guy reaching for in his back seat as they walk up is going to have an AR-15 or, an AK-47. Next caller, Lady B. Thank you, by the way.
Okay, we have Carl from Nashville.
Cool. Hey, Carl. Welcome. Whoop. A little choppy. There you are. Are you there?
Oh.
Yeah.
Listen, here's the thing right here, man. And this is the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
My 17-year-old son been working since he was 16. He's had a job since he was 16.
Yeah.
He's been working with me. I don't know if I told you before, but I have a small business here in Nashville. He's been working with me and him and my other kids ever since they've been able to fit a pair of gloves.
Right.
Unfortunately for them, I have big hands they inherited, so they've been wearing gloves a long time. So he's been working. So my son, who earned every damn dime that he makes as a 17-year-old boy, took his girlfriend out to a dinner and a movie last night.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of me telling my son, hey, enjoy your movie, enjoy your date, I got to tell him, hey, man, sit up your back at the back of the movie so you can see all exits and all entrances.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware of your surroundings while you're in the food court at all times. Do not put on your headphones to listen to your music in public. And when you're standing out there waiting for me to pick you up, pay attention to your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I have to tell my son.
Right.
I have to give him these damn instructions because it's pretty much a war out there. And where the hell is Wayne LaPierre? We need to talk about, gun control big time. This whole show should have been about gun control because the guy that got killed in Minnesota, he was a good guy with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And he got gunned down by the damn police department.
Right.
This man right here did everything right. He had his car registered and licensed and had registered and license to open carry
and told the police, told the police officer, said I've got a license.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if you all notice this or not, but all around America, if you look at license plates, I guarantee you it's 50 license plates from 50 states. I guarantee you about 37 or 38 of those states have the little barcodes. Because here in Tennessee, we have little barcodes.
Yeah.
They can scan your car before you even, so they know that I have a gun permit. They know who I am. They know my address.
Right.
They know everything about me before they get out of the car. He knew that man had an open carry. When sense do you, in the broad daylight, with a woman, a child, and a man, pull over, and you know, and with a gun up to a window? When do we start doing that?
Right.
And then as far as the guy, can you imagine if the guy with the AR-15 strapped to his shoulder, the when I was out there, the good guy with the gun, if he started firing, guess what? The police might start firing on him.
No
thinking
question.
He's a part of the problem.
That's right.
He could get killed.
Yeah.
So where the hell? So here's my bottom line right here, because I know you got a lot of callers. Bottom line is this right here. If we must have gun control, because one man with the damn AR-15 held down and at bay one of the biggest police departments in America. And on top of that, they had to use military tactics to kill him. They used a drone to kill that man because he had military-grade weaponry. Now, if this doesn't get it done, man, I don't know what will.
I hear you.
I really don't. Where is Wayne LaPierre? He should have been front and center in Minneapolis. The other guy was protecting his property. He's, you know, so
that amazes me that the NRA had nothing to say about him being shot as a open carry legal firearm owner who was killed by the police he said, I've got a license to carry. There's a gun in the glove box or what have you. He was reaching for his wallet and they shot him. You'd think that was right on NRA territory. You'd think that they would jump.
The thing.
Right.
What they mean by that? What they mean by that is a good guy with the gun is a good white guy with the gun.
Right.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Fox News if that was a white couple and a white kid in that back seat, and that man had got killed, and he had an open carry permit? Fox News would have blew up. Wayne LaPierre would have had a rally in Minnesota because he would have been. I can hear it now. They're yelling and screaming about a good guy with a gun got killed.
The army is coming. The Obama's nation is coming to take away your guns, and this is proof. The cops have.
That's why we have to get more guns. They would have. The speech right itself. Wayne LaPierre would have been on TV on all the Sunday shows, all up and down Fox, telling everybody to go get armed because you are under attack. Your Second Amendment rights are under attack. This man had his gun registered and everything, and they killed him. Had that been a white person?
Yeah, I agree.
And you know, right now, and I remember listening yesterday. A lot of people, a lot of the talking heads, especially on the right, were saying that there shouldn't be any protests, that everybody should have a moment of silence and pause for a second. Hell no. What they were supposed to do is get right back out there and protest even harder because when you slow down, that's when they get their talking points together. But if you keep on hitting them and keep on hitting them and keep on hitting them, I mean, you know, Dr. King and those guys, they didn't just stop at one thing. They got a little bit, they went further. They got a little bit more, and they kept going further until at least it was perceived to be playing on an equal field, even though we're not. We know it's really not an equal field out there for black people and white people in this country. But at least that perception was out there. But we must make this thing, especially in Dallas, about gun control. They had to use a military tactic to kill this man because why? Because he had one of the biggest police departments, one of the best police departments in the world. He had them pinned down. One damn man. They thought in the beginning, they thought it was three or four people.
They thought there were four of them, yeah. They arrested three other people and are holding them. And by the way, those three others, at least one of them is more than likely going to be turned loose as an open carry legal gun owner who had to be in jail for 48 hours while they figured it out after this. And so where will Wayne LaPierre be on that one as well? Because it's a farce. Because what they really mean is they want this fantasy. Appreciate the call, Carl. We really have to take a break, but I want to say Once your son turns 18 and his date is 18, if they want to come to my shows when I'm in Nashville, I perform at Zany's when I'm in town, please bring them and yourself and as my guests, because I look forward to meeting you in person, and them in person. And I'm so sorry you have to have that conversation when that drives me nuts. We'll be back right after this. More of your calls. 773-763-9278. Yeah, whew. Let's look at the... I was going to call him, but Carl's don't want that. Amos, you can still call in. I guarantee the conversation will continue forward. But this is the problem that we have, the challenge that we have as a society is a balanced approach and making headway, because it's constant growth is an ugly process. There's elements of growing pains. There's stops and starts. There's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes there's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But at least, and again, that's the value of a constant and never-ending progress, of trying to, I don't care. We're all, equal rights and the equal application of those rights, which is really the concern in America. And I think we do ourselves a disservice as progressives and liberals if we go too far down the equal rights aspect. Because quite frankly, on paper, and the LGBT community is the exception in this, in that they can be fired just for being themselves, if that's indeed the reasoning. There's all sorts of watery ways to get around that in some ways. But anyways, equal application.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
We obviously are in a situation in the United States where the gun culture, where the letter of the law is not in line with the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law was written in a time when 1 bullet, 1 gun, and it took you time to reload. And now, when citizens in a highly dense urban environment can own military-grade weapons, which are specifically, and by the way, the whole assault weapons, there's no such thing as an assault weapon or all weapons are assault weapons argument from the NRA is an absurdity. Certain weapons are designed and built to kill a lot of people for as quickly as possible. That's what a military-grade weapon is. This argument from the right that they're single shot and therefore they're no different from a Winchester rifle is crap. That if you've got a 6-shot hunting rifle, or a single shot hunting rifle, or a double shot, a double barrel shotgun, for example, and you're hunting pheasants or a bird with that's somehow equated with the same as an AR-15 or an AK-47 or the Sig Hauers or what have you, that they're the same because they shoot one at a time is ridiculous. It's a stupid argument, and the people that make it know it. I've seen this a couple of times where people go, yeah, it fires just like my Winchester. Yeah, here's the difference. After 5 shots, you have to take this thing out, put another one in, and do it again. Take this one out, put another one in, do it again. When you do that, that gives other human beings time to run for cover. That's why a military-grade weapon has a 30-shot clip in it, so that the people you're shooting at don't have time to run for cover. So you can shoot them in the back, because more than likely in a military situation, shooting them in the back is different than shooting civilians in the back, because those people are just trying to get in a better position to shoot back at you. So you keep shooting in a war situation. If guys are retreating and running away, then you keep shooting at them because they're probably trying to run and hide behind something. And you don't want to have to pull a clip out, and you duct tape them together so that you can pop one out. You don't even have to reach. You just put the other one back in. So it's effectively a 6-shot, with a speed exchange, a 60 shot with a speed exchange. So don't patronize the world with your ridiculous argument that military assault weapons, AR-15s and anything with a 30-shot capacity is the same as a hunting rifle. It's not. And if you can't hit what you're shooting at in under 10 shots, you shouldn't be shooting in a neighborhood. You suck. That is the most childish, intellectually dishonest argument from pro-gun advocates ever. And Gavin McInnes, it's like his favorite argument. And there's dozens of these people who make this constant argument. Don't be stupid. You know better. You're not dumb. Grow up. These guns are specifically for shooting people no matter where you see them and having to reload as little as possible because you're in a war zone. So, limited ammo, limited clips, completely reasonable under the Second Amendment. You have the right to own that gun, but you don't have the right to own a howitzer or a Gatling gun. It's absurd because, if you listen to these guys, Old Painless is for hunting deer. The gun that Jesse the Body Ventura uses, I think it is, in Predator. I ain't got time to bleed. Right. So why would you bother changing clips? You're shooting an alien that's got lasers coming out of its face. All right. Let's take another call.
We have David from San Francisco.
Cool. Hey, David, welcome.
Yeah, how are you, Hal? There are a couple of different... I understand you're trying to tone it down, and it certainly makes sense, so I'll try to do it, but up there in Chicago, you've got Honan Square, and they have never shut it down yet. And the thing that's bugging me about, for example, Dallas, they've had cops shot, right? So the last time there was a big cop shooting, that was in New York City, right? And there, if I understand right, there were like 20,000 cops came to New York City on the taxpayer dime, lived in swank hotels for a couple of days. The church that held the ceremony could only hold a couple of hundred people. So all of these cops got taxpayer dime to go to a funeral, and it's a junket to New York City. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge fraud going on with our dollars. Yep. And I take it back to Operation Gladio, which is a post-World War II scam in which the Nazis put themselves in positions of power all around the world, in state departments, in police departments, in military positioning, and they've waited for this day where they could just have ultimate power and be able to milk a budget. And in the case of Dallas, you can watch the police chief in his press conference say, "We had to use our robot bomb." Mm-hmm. Now, I never thought that the police had a robot bomb.
They didn't.
And where in the hell do they get? who's inventing robot bombs that they're just waiting to use?
Right.
So, this is depraved. We've got something enormous going on. I think it's Operation Gladio. And I actually take it a little further. With global warming, they know that by the year 2020, the Pentagon has had studies that say that by 2020 there's going to be food riots. And that rather than plan, that report came out in 2006, so that's 10 years ago, rather than plan for local gardens and local hospitals and clinics and preparations for global warming, they have put more military weapons in the hands of crazy people, and they're doing more to divide us. So at a time when the environment is going to cause us an enormous amount of hardship, the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex have built for this day where they expect that they would rather have civil war than they would quiet development.
Well, there's certainly I don't even know that you have to go back that far or even that deep in some ways. And I appreciate the call. I don't know about Operation Gladio. I'll look into it. It does not surprise me that there's constantly, it's kind of like the concept of the unthinkable crime. I tweeted this last week, but there's no such thing as an unthinkable crime because if you're discussing it, somebody already thought it up and did it. And the same thing is true of military plans. There is a military plan for almost everything because they're in the plan business. And again, if you're operating from anybody could be a hostile at any time, which is the experience of the military over time. If you just, and again, I'm looking at this from the most innocent possible version of events. That eventually go, well, what if this happens? What if all these people turn? What if we do have a bloodborne disease like The Walking Dead? What if we have, a situation where somebody figures out how to, aerosol of an idea virus and make the entire state of Texas attack the rest of the country, or like any number of things along those lines. Somebody in the military has worked up a plan based on it, whether it ever sees the light of day or not. Here's the thing that's really concerning to me. During the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, white supremacists were trying to work their way into the military because they were having such a hard time finding soldiers that would go and fight after a while, after people were starting to get wise to the promises made were not real, and they were having a real deficit of people joining the Army after the initial 9/11 boost had worn off. And in the end, these white supremacists started basically saying, we should just go in there, get all the training, and then we'll use it later for our race war. And they got wise to it, and the government fairly quietly started rejecting them and kicking them out when they found them. Around 2007, there was a big spike in them ditching a lot of these guys. In 2005, there was a spike of them turning them away. The ones that actually got in were slowly weeded out over time so as to not create too big a visual stink. Well, in the end, you had oh, wow, we're way over break. I beg your pardon, Lady B. In the end, a lot of those guys started showing up on the doorsteps of police departments. They didn't give them dishonorable discharges. They just wanted to get them out of there. So they let them phase out. They gave them a little bit of a warning. Don't make a big stink, and we'll let you leave with what benefits you have. So these guys got to go into a police station going, yeah, I got an honorable discharge, and I'm done. And I'd like to go into this, or I got out of the military, my tour's done, so I'd like to go in the police department. And these guys were the same guys who were ginning up to do stuff like this. And they endanger every cop that's working today when those guys are in a police force. So we'll be back. More of your calls, 773-763-9278. And by the way, it's not the end of the world. Michael, it's not the end of the world.
We still have 4 callers,
Okay.
but one of them is Steve from the Gold Coast calling back.
Oh, yeah. We'll get then he has to go kind of the tail end unless he's got a happy ending. Let's get the other 3 first.
Okay, cool. Because he put down that he had 2 more points out of 100 more.
I don't doubt it. So we'll keep him for the happy ending then. We'll try to soldier through these guys. And sorry I went over break. I've totally lost track of time today.
It's okay. I figured I'll let you go 2 more minutes because we were late out of the other one.
Yeah. Reading about Operation Gladio.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Okay, Lady B, who else do we have? I want to make sure our callers get in. I've been yapping. Yeah.
We have Jim from Chicago.
Cool. Hey, Jim, go ahead.
Hey, Hal, can you hear me?
I can't. I can, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was just saying is like a lot of people keep giving these police force a lot of room. It's a historic racist organization. I think you touched on it when you saying like these neo-Nazis was joining. And I've been pulled over 9 times this year. I counted it Friday when all this stuff was going on. I had 2 tickets issued, and one guy had a swastika on his forearm. And I'm sitting up here like, these are the police that we have to deal with. Now, every black man I know, and I know a lot of people, have a police story.
Right.
And this cannot be a 400-year coincidence. These people are terrorists in our communities. They prey upon us. They seek us out. Whether you have a criminal record, they surely want to try to get you one. That's the way I look at it. They preying upon us. I mean, they get behind our cars. They follow us for blocks. And meanwhile, somebody can be selling drugs right in front of them. They want to see what you're doing in your car. And it's just, I don't think this will go on in any other community. And it's not a glitch. It's not an oversight. Because if it was a glitch or oversight, they would have stopped this years ago. If there was a predatory rapist going around in some type of organization, just like the Catholic Church eventually purged all the pedophilic priests, I think they would do that. I somehow think this is designed to work the way it's working. We are a revenue source, and we can't keep getting punished by the Constitution if we're not going to be protected by it. Why should we go to jail for constitutional violations, and the Constitution does not protect us and do not punish these people when they break the Constitution of murdering us? We don't see justice. That act that you saw with that man shooting off the roof, it's an act of people that is desperate and they crying out for justice, and justice won't come. It's equivalent to a Palestinian strapping a bomb. Most people can't understand that because you're not in those desperate needs. And for a country to talk about freedom and bring a democracy across the world, start at home.
I agree. Well said. I mean, I think you look at Muhammad Ali, who a hero to most human beings in the world. That was precisely the reason why he wouldn't fight the Vietnam War. As a conscientious objector, why would I go over and shoot this man when right here in my own country, the democracy that I'm supposed to be fighting for wouldn't protect me, or my people evenly. And I, you're absolutely right. I do think there is room for obviously the police force in general is not a terrorist force. It couldn't statistically possibly be, but it is absolutely infested in some areas with police officers that do that. And I think there's also a financial incentive aspect. The for-profit prisons and the school to prison pipeline is seen as an investment opportunity. And if a police force wants the money and funds to deal with actual threats that they're told are just around the corner all the time, like the SWAT team in Peoria would need, they're going to need the money from somewhere. Where are they going to get that money from? People who don't have a lawyer that will clog up the system and cost the court more money and not actually get any money coming in. So poor people become the target. And in that circumstance, the poor people are already black people. Then the black people, because they now have a bench warrant or something that leads to, graduates up and up and up, become unable to get a job or in the case of the drug dealer that you bypass to pull over somebody new, you're guaranteeing that the community doesn't, individuals in the community can't break out. You're creating this, and that's why the ban the box idea is, I think, a great first step. I think the ending of the war on drugs is another great step. I think that's where the opposition to it also comes from. It is a racist reflex in a lot of places, and then there are, reasonable facts unreasonably applied that get used as a weapon all the time in these circumstances. Well, if you start a business, you should be able to know if somebody's committed a crime. Yeah, if it's related to what you're doing. If you're an accountant and you want to hire an accountant and he's been busted for embezzling, that's one thing. But if it's not related, it's kind of none of your business, especially if they've either done their time or not been convicted. That's the other thing, too, is a lot of people they have a record of being picked up a bunch of times. That's what gets around in a community. That's what gets around and lowers the bar for everybody. And then what job can you get? Only the illegal ones. And then you take one because you got to eat, and then it just ratchets up even further. And then the cops go, well, he had a reason to. He was a known felon. He hung out with known felons. His house was full of them, even though he went to the wrong house and shot it up. There was probably some people in there that deserved it. Like that, it gets gnarly. That being said, those Dallas cops that were protecting people, shooting back, not all of them were white, and a lot of them, including the white ones, were defending each other in a familial situation, in a brotherhood of their own. So, and brother and sisterhood in that regard. So, I don't disagree with the emotion of what you're saying, and I don't disagree with a lot of the facts. I will only say that it's a societal issue we all got to do better. We do. So there you go. And let's grab another caller real quick if we could.
I have Ivan.
Cool. Hi, Ivan. Go ahead.
Hey, what up, Hal?
Yeah.
The bottom line in all these killings is the insane gun laws in America.
Mm-hmm.
The insane amount of guns on our streets allows those cops who are racist to shoot first and ask questions later.
Mm-hmm.
More guns, it's simple math. More guns equal more death, period. Praying and moments of silence prove God to be like the tar baby in the Burr Rabbit story.
Mm-hmm.
He says nothing and he does nothing. It's time for us to demand a ban on these stupid assault weapons. Now, and getting back to the NRA's main point, good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. Well, there were hundreds of good guy cops there on the streets in Dallas. Hundreds of them. Did they stop the guy with the gun? No. So let's put that myth to bed, Wayne LaPierre. Good guys with the guns cannot stop a surprise murderer with an AR-15. It's impossible because he will kill 5 of you before you realize where he's at.
That's
and
right.
even after they knew where he's at, It wasn't guns that killed this guy.
They also tried to talk him down, by the way. They spent time trying to negotiate with this guy so they could take him alive. That's what again, I'm sympathetic to our last caller's view that that there are terrorist elements in police forces and there are neo-Nazis and other groups that are certainly, like I said, that's the scary part is a lot of these guys left the military and went into the police force when they were rejected by the military for those very reasons. Police departments, their budgets balloon in response to increasing concepts of crime when the statistics actually don't match the the statistical reality does not match the budgetary needs in a lot of cases. Too many cops, too many for this, and then eventually you go, well, when will I get to act on what I'm supposed to do as a police officer? When do I get to do this? So in this particular thing, those cops. There was a black man who was shooting police officers, and it was still their responsibility to try and get him to come out alive, to give himself up. That's amazing, and it's amazing that that's what it takes for them to extend, that to somebody. Whereas if you're in a car and and you're going, I have a right to carry, and I'm just going to reach for my wallet, and I'm, and that can get you killed. That actually gets less, respect and a safe barrier of reaction than the Dallas cops gave this guy, which I think is, impressive and shows what the Dallas police were all about in this circumstance, and they deserve credit for trying to do that. Let's take a break. We'll take our last two callers. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Yeah, there's I think you're right, Tom. If you look at the perception of, what it's like internet predators, sexual predators. This idea that the internet is just full of them, that there's just, everywhere there's. If your kid's online at all, they're just surrounded by sexual predators. And while they certainly exist, the trillions of interactions that happen every day on the internet, a microscopic amount are pederasts that are trying to interact with children and that actually have the recourse to actually reach them. It narrows and narrows and narrows. But the perception is that they could be right around the corner. Look at if you look at the sex offender registry, it doesn't say what they were registered for. So maybe I'm a target, maybe my kid's a target, maybe we're both a target, maybe, and that's your day every day. So the emotional response of a lot of cops and of a lot of African Americans in this country is if somebody on the sex offender registry just moved next door to you. More than likely, statistically speaking, they're reformed or they didn't commit a crime that relates to you, so they're not a threat to you, or they wouldn't have been let out. But maybe they had stuff they didn't get caught for. Maybe they are a threat. So now how do you go and how do you leave the house every day? That's the issue. And then and nothing happens. Let's say nothing ever happens. They're there. But every day of, who is this person? I got to worry about this every time I leave the house. Then you hear about an actual sexual predator who acts on somebody on the news, and you go, yeah, I know, next door, I got somebody. I looked on the registry, there they are.
15 seconds.
And so you go back and forth in your head, and you experientially, because of the news you hear and the information you have on your neighbors, you perceive yourself as a victim of that same crime over time. And then you react to everybody. Yeah.
Welcome back to the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
Welcome back. So we have two more callers. Let's grab them. I think one's for a second round. But who do we have, Lady B?
We have Seth.
Oh, cool. Hey, Seth, watch your mouth. Watch your language. I always have to say that right away. You're the only person we've ever had to drop twice, I think. But go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, Hal, aside from some stand-up appearances in Dallas, I imagine you've done some radio appearances as well.
Yep.
Well, one of the radio stations out in Dallas, KEGL 97.1 The Eagle, they have a foundation that caters to fallen police officers and firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was listening to them last night. They raised up to $150,000, and this is Friday night. They raised up to $150,000 for all 5 of the fallen police officers.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to split up to $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a year's worth salary.
Right.
So that's my happy ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly. Again, I appreciate that, Seth, and we'll grab. I'll say this at the end. I'll save it for this because I know Steve from the Gold Coast wants to come back, and he's going to need as much time as possible. I think he's. Yeah. Is Steve still there? Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Yes. A really quick point because it was the second point I wanted to make. Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello. Yes. Yes. And that is, you're absolutely right with regard to the narrative. The story for this week is not going to be the police who killed innocent African Americans. It's going to be the story that got hijacked by the shooter in Dallas. And unfortunately, that's an individual who thought he was, indignant about what was happening in the rest of the country, given the experience of African Americans with law enforcement, and he has really done a disservice. And I hope that message goes out there. You can go ahead and fight the good fight if that's what you think, it is. And for him, it seemed to have been violent. But the reality is, you're doing a disservice to your own cause.
That's right.
And lastly, if you want, if you don't want to read a bunch of scholarly journals and other, shall we say, research-oriented material about how we got here, my hat's off to David Simon, the creator of The Wire. If you have time, just, when you want to binge watch something, binge watch The Wire, one of the greatest shows that was ever on television, and it will give you an idea about disinvestment in communities and in human beings, about why we have a drug war, about why we have crime in certain communities, about why that leads to policing in some communities that differs from others. All of these things. It's a great show. So, again, if you really don't want to read a lot of scholarship, it's something that does a good job of explaining how we got to where we are in part.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Look at that. Part of our happy ending is that Steve got his points out, was able to call back and get more points out, and still left me with some time to talk. That's amazing. We all look forward to the day when Steve has his own show, so we can call in and he doesn't have to. He won't get a word in edgewise. Okay, so there's a couple of points that I want to make today, especially around the happy ending. I'm not gonna play the song right now because it's a bit much. Here's what I want to say, and this is something we all need to recognize. Just like the Orlando shooting, just like Sandy Hook, just like the shooting of these police officers in Dallas, just like the shootings of individual, unarmed black men by police officers, as horrifying and egregious and difficult and painful as these circumstances are, the reality is the volume of people who are loving and are supportive of the victims and of the victims' families in these circumstances vastly outnumber the individuals carrying these things out. And I want to stress to everybody that when stuff like this happens, avoid the thought, or at least articulating the thought, that what is the world coming to? Because what the world is coming to is a greater awareness of how horrible these kind of things are. These things have happened all through time. They're obviously, in the case of high-powered rifles with big magazines, and the militarization of the public's ideas. I mean, it's how easy it is to be a serial killer today based on more than 50 years ago, because of all the stories, movies, TV shows that show you how they got caught and how they didn't get caught for a long time. There's a lot of information out there, and yet still the same volume of human beings act on these kind of things, the same number of individuals. And as we grow as a populace, there will be an increase statistically in the number of human beings who deal with problems this way. That in their emotional overreaction, shoot a bunch of innocent police officers, or call 911 and ambush them at their house because they believe that they watch, from watching certain YouTube videos, they think that the end of the world is coming and they want to do their part to make it happen faster. Or circumstances like Sandy Hook and the like. The reality is, every single day, whenever stuff like this happens, the vast majority of people are just trying to go about their lives, making lives better for themselves, their families, and their communities, their companies that they work for, the labs they work in, the universities they go to. They really are trying really hard. And that's the volume of human beings on the planet, across the board. Whether we're talking about ISIS versus the number of Muslims in the world, whether we're talking about Black Lives Matter versus this shooter, whether we're talking about the legal gun owners who have a rifle for hunting and a handgun for defense versus this, Dylan Ruff or the Sandy Hook shooter or the like. The vast majority of human beings don't interact this way, are horrified by these kinds of circumstances. And even the egregious ones, even the act out angry claims of this is civil war, we have to do something, comes from a position of people being hurt and shocked and incapable on a maturity level of handling the circumstance. That as idiotic and vile as Joe Walsh's response, for example, the former congressman, Joe Walsh's response was to this. That's the response of someone who's intellectually incapable of thinking broader and actually coming up with a solution. The world has evolved past him and he's not caught up. And there's a lot of those among us. And a good portion of the time they're going to do something violent, but it's not indicative of the rest of humanity. We're all actually getting there. And as we get there, there'll be these big leaps back. But I'm not alone in my experience as a straight white male of my heart hurting for the black kids that I know and their parents and the experience that they have to go through. I find it devastating, and it needs to be handled as best we can in the most loving way we can as possible. And in many ways, as we move towards a more open society that's respectful and caring, we're going to have these circumstances where those who are not ready for it, those who are not evolved enough to handle it, or those who think that the progress of humankind isn't moving fast enough for the injustice or the grievance that they personally have, will act out violently and horribly. And it's our responsibility in those situations to not join them in that response, to not take our response to 9/11 is to have a war in Iraq. We can't do that emotionally every time something like this happens. It's work, but we got to do it. I'm Hal Sparks. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Lady B, by the way, for taking care of us so well, and love to you and your family for what we discussed, and everybody in the chat room for being part of it today. And remember, everybody, when you go outside, look around. There's way more people who are on your side than against you. And that's true of people on the right, too. You guys need to calm down. You're not as hated as you think. That was my mom laughing. Camden, say bye, and I love you.
Bye, I love you.
And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
What are you doing?
No, I was doing radio, baby.
Dad.
Do you want to say hi to everybody in the chat room?
No, listen.
Okay.
How I look.
You look great. Oh, you dressed yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Look at that! It's a miracle! It's a miracle! Don't scream into the mic, and don't, because there's people listening and you'll hurt their ears.
It's a miracle. Why are you laughing?
Because you're sweet and adorable and funny. That's why.
Why did you say I'm adorable?
Because look at your face. Look at your little eyes.
Tell Daddy what you were watching.
What were you watching? Oh no.
The doctor animals that are fixing animals. The doctor.
You saw rabbits and birds.
Oh, you saw the veterinarian show?
And I saw doctors peel a skunk's belly apart so they could fix his belly.
Oh, that's nice of them.
They were taking out his guts.
Ew. The bad parts of his guts?
Yeah.
Oh. This is what happens when Gigi is watching, because Gigi's a nurse. And by the way, this is how I was raised too, so don't worry about it.
Did you get your belly cut?
No, I wouldn't. No, not at all. I got my finger cut open once. I had surgery on my finger. Look at that. See that little line right there?
Oh, God, a beetle.
He had lead taken out of his head.
That's right.
No, toward a needle.
Oh, yeah.
Why did you get cut? Ho, toward a needle.
Because my finger was broken, and so they had to fix it. Everybody in the chat room, say hi to Camden. Yeah. I do not stand a chance. It's true. That's right. It's kind of an amazing thing when he boink, 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 boink. There you go. He's jumping up and down on my Bosu ball. This is how it all starts, and then you're like, oh. Anyways, I gotta go, you guys. I gotta take care of his adorableness, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, by the way, to everybody who contributed and support, pushing the support button and donating to the channel and all that kind of stuff. It's really gonna help when I move and build my own channel. The more I can do this kind of stuff as my main way of doing things, the more time I get with Cam. So that's why I'm really focusing on it. But it's really like starting over from scratch in a lot of ways, career-wise, to do it this way. But so I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And thanks, Julie, for being such a booster about it, and everybody for doing that. And if you can sign up for the Patreon, please do. If you can pass that around, please do. You guys are awesome, and I will see you again soon. So cheers. Thank you, guys. All right. Here, Cam, come over and say bye.
Bye.
There you go. See you guys next time.